Now, Jake, I know it's going to be very confronting for our audience to hear this, but you think that you've discovered something potentially about yourself as a result of that experience, that you might in fact have abilities that you were never aware of.
I know in my childhood, if we look back to when I was a kid, I sincerely believe that the screening I went through in high school, my grandparents are, when I was a kid, the reason I joined the military is real simple. I wanted to jump out of airplanes and kill bad guys and make my grandparents proud. And my grandparents were the most amazing people I've ever met. They grew up during the Great Depression, dealt with World War II. And my grandfathers particularly were the strongest and the most sensitive men I've ever met, all wrapped up into one person. We can call them Navy Grandpa and Army Grandpa, let's say. So, Navy Grandpa was a very influential naval officer. He was actually a member of the SEALs predecessors, the Scouts and Raiders. Army Grandpa was an Army captain and a salesman. They both founded our neighborhood church and literally set the cornerstone to our church together. Unfortunately, their children, my parents, were very loving people, but made a lot of bad decisions. And this led to step families for me at a very young age. And to get away from the abusive environment, I spent a lot of time outside. I would tell my mom I'm going to my dad's house. I'd tell my dad I'm going to my mom's house, and I'd bug out and just go live outside.
You were living in the bush somewhere.
Yeah, essentially I was homeless, but I just told myself I was a wild commando survivalist, and that gave me pride in what I was doing instead of shame. And so that I refined a pretty high level of independence at a young age. But my grandparents were still always there, making sure I had some outlet for certain things. And so they got me involved with an art program and a music program. I'll have to tell you, so my Navy grandfather, he was the superintendent. He got his doctorate in education, and by the time I had graduated high school, he had retired as a superintendent of our school district. So he was a very influential man.
And I understand he ran the gifted and talented education program for that school district.
Yeah, you could say he was the ambassador for this area for the GATE program, which was a program for gifted and talented kids. And my personal experience with that was great. It was, I just got pulled out of normal class a couple of times a day, at least twice, and got to go to a private classroom where I had one-on-one time with a staff member there who played a lot of games with me inside and outside, and we ran a number of creative classes together. And outside of that, I also, after school, I would attend, I had a private art teacher, I learned music. And so I felt like I had a unique education experience as a kid. My grandfather also got me involved in water polo and swimming. He was a diver and a swimmer. And water polo became a great outlet for me. I found the competition and the physical exhaustion was like great medicine for me.
Looking back though now, do you think there might have been something special about your selection into the GATE program?
Well, if we look into my high school years, unfortunately, my senior year, I got in a lot of trouble. When I did show up to school, I was a bit disruptive in class. I had a smart mouth. I liked being a class clown. And I got in a lot of fights. And by the time my senior year came around, I was the varsity goalie on our water polo team. And 5 weeks into my senior year, I got expelled for fighting again. And at that time, I was on a disciplinary contract. So my accumulation of bad behavior throughout high school resulted in a contract, which was interesting. And it was a one and done fail situation. And 5 weeks into my senior year, I was expelled. At this time, my grandparents decided to hold an intervention. And I don't even think my parents or step-parents know, but the two men got together and met with me and decided to research military programs that would be available at that time. And so we made several trips down to UCLA, to an office near there, and I began going through a series of tests of all kinds. There were physical, physiological, psychological, creative tests, and we assumed that, you know, all of this was pretty typical.
You know now, don't you, that the US Air Force has been secretly testing people through the GATE program for certain psychic abilities?
Yes.
Were you tested?
Yes.
Do you think that might have played a part in what happened to you that night when you were recovering that craft?
Yeah, and I don't know that the Air Force realized that. I'll tell you, I know others that I've come to meet through the program that we'll talk about that were in a psionic program that have a very similar backstory. But for whatever reason, I was not used in that way. Again, my creativity and intuition resulted in, as I've shared with you before, being used for creative war games, being very creative in war games. But what I used as intuition, if we make a spectrum and we put intuition on the conservative side, let's say the right side of the scale, on the more far out side, that might be something that looks a lot like telepathy or telekinesis. And we call this psionics, which we can talk about. And so I knew I was intuitive, I knew I was creative, and I also know I had good imagination. And so looking back, it was clear that becoming a red team expert, those are the tools that I would deploy. My intuition and creativity is what made me successful in that capacity.
I'm quite struck by how many very senior elite soldiers, special operations soldiers, when they admit what they do in a combat situation where they're facing imminent harm, there's often a moment where they talk about intuition, precognition.
Yeah.
They knew something was about to happen. Does that happen to you?
Yeah, I would say that I have a keen ability to make good decisions, short term and long term. I also find comfort in chaos, you could say. And I actually see things more clearly in chaos and tend to make very wise decisions.
And is that a quality that you recognize in a lot of your colleagues in special operations?
Yeah, you might be interested to know that people at an elite operator level, there's a lot of them that are left-handed, a lot of them that were artists as kids or still are, very good drawers, illustrators, musicians. They're also, if you were to describe their personalities, you might find yourself using some oxymorons like peaceful warriors, sensitive savages, you could say. That's a real thing. And I'll add one more. We're a bunch of dead serious goofballs. So there's this dichotomy between feminine and masculine at the extremes that I don't know if you could go as far as to say is the big blue Air Force and the big black Department of Defense knows what they're doing and they're prospecting for these kids at a level and they're planning this long-term, well thought out path. But what you will find is that we end up making our way there.
Something made you connect with that machine that night.
Yes, it chose to connect with me and reportedly no one else on my crew.
So when you got back to base, did you report the fact that you'd had that extraordinary...
Hell no.
Why not?
Because I didn't know what happened, and I don't want, you carry a lot of responsibility as a pilot. In this process, I've moved from being a very pragmatic person with a tremendous amount of responsibility in day-to-day grind in this dimension to a place where I've had to take into account and incorporate things that are basically metaphysical and find a balance between the two, all while maintaining the trust that I could do my very pragmatic work. So this was something pretty new to me this night. The last thing I'm going to do is go back and tell my team that I almost had to pop the load off because I was connected with a goddess that was making me cry.
So you've had those two anomalous incidents with craft.
Yeah.
Clearly, these are objects that are being recovered that do not appear to be human technology.
So this is a good thing to talk about, because what we're dealing with is either non-human intelligence, if we want to use those words or that phrase or that acronym. It's either that, or we need to dramatically redefine what we think human intelligence is.
Because this object, whatever it was capable of communicating with you in your mind.
That object, or whatever was controlling that object, was also connecting to me through the mind, through my mind.
Now you learned, didn't you, that this was the tip of an iceberg. It wasn't
Correct.
just you.
Correct.
What did you learn?
Well, my work, coincidentally, shortly after that, led me in support of another particular part of the program, which deals directly with looking at this piece right here, which is there a component on the summoning side that we call, and the operation side of these non-human craft, that has to do with consciousness, or at least a field of consciousness that perhaps humans can tap into, and maybe all beings in the universe can tap into.
What is a psionic?
A psionic person is someone with a predisposition for extral, temporal, you could say, abilities and sensitivities. Someone who has a fantastic intuition.
What did you discover the psionics were being used for in the program?
In the program, there was certainly a desire to explore the idea that perhaps UAP could be summoned, could be communicated with, could be controlled, and could be persuaded to land, all by deploying people with psionic abilities to interface and communicate with the UAP.
And did you see that happen?
Yes, I did.
So there were people who were purportedly psionically gifted who were brought into the program.
Yes, there were.
Where did they come from?
They come from all over. They're not, and all over, I mean, from outside the United States as well as in.
And how are they detected? How are they picked?
I don't really know. You'd have to ask somebody else.
I'm told that there are particular indigenous communities around the world, Native Americans, people in different third world countries, who apparently have enhanced psychic abilities that are recognized.
Sure. I think most people could grasp the idea that perhaps people that are from other cultures, our culture leaves a lot to be desired when we look at the contaminants that exist in our food, contaminants that exist in our drugs, and contaminants in our culture. And some of these contaminants, it turns out, aren't great for your spirituality or your consciousness or your psionic abilities. And so those who live a particular lifestyle or live in a culture where they have a more natural or direct way of life with nature and their surroundings seem to, within those groups of people, there's a little bit higher demographic than there typically is for those with a psionic ability. So these people are sought out and are used to contribute to the research that might be going on with the psionic.
I want to put something to you.
Yeah.
I've spoken myself, you haven't told me this, but I've spoken myself to people of Native American background, Indigenous Americans, who say that this is a particularly popular thing for recruitment from the program to happen in Indigenous American communities.
Yes, I know that for a fact.
There are also people from countries in the third world where these abilities are recognized and not treated with stigma as we do in the Western world.
Yeah, there is no stigma. In fact, if there's any stigma, if you're the one who's not playing along, you might be the outcast in those cultures.
So the irony is that part of your discovery inside the program is that there genuinely are people who can actually make a mental spiritual connection to a technology.
Yes, 100%.
Was that a revelation to you?
It was fun. It was actually fun to learn. It's one of the things in our work that was like, oh my gosh, there's more to life. It answered certain questions and intuitions, if you will, that we have going back to your childhood, and if anything, that were most present in your childhood, which is very satisfying because, something as a child, you have this particular feeling, and it kind of dies out as you become more mature and have to take on more responsibility. And so to be able to nurture that and accept that that might be the case, and to see organizations as serious as those who we worked with taking this seriously was actually a heck of a lot of fun.
So this is an ontological shock, I think, for many people watching this, because we're all being told, firstly, there's no such thing as aliens visiting this planet.
Yeah.
And secondly, we're all being told there's no such thing as telepathy or psychic abilities. It's rubbish.
Yeah, I don't think there is going to be an ontological shock. I think people are going to react to it the same way I did. I think it's going to be an ontological relief, because I think everyone deep down knows that there is more to life than what we are being told and experiencing. And to know that there might be something like a sixth, seventh, eighth sense that has a spiritual connection, and that might actually have a good nature and application behind it, like, not only is it not shocking, but it should be welcomed, I would think.
Well, I'd go further, Jake. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
And isn't that the message you got from whatever that
It's
intelligence
overwhelming
was?
sense of beauty. Overwhelming.
And love?
And love.
And it's funny hearing an elite soldier talking about love
Yeah.
and benevolence.
You know what fuels every elite soldier? Is a preservation of love or something that they love. That's what's behind all the strength.
So let's go through the psionic program. When a psionic operator engages with technology, how do they do it?
Using their mind, something like meditation. And I need to preface this by saying this is stuff that I've come to know recently. The night that I had this experience, there was another team involved, come to find out was the psionics team, and they were also working that night.
And do you think it was them that had attracted the object in the first place?
Yeah, I do.
And so how did the object come to land?
I think it was invited to land by the psionics team.
Is that always how they make the objects land?
No, there's a number of other ways. So I have to tell you that weapon systems are tested out there.
I know this from other sources. I know that high pulse microwave weapons are being used to bring down some of these craft.
Yes.
Now, how often was it done where the objects would land on their own accord, and how often was it done that weapons would be used?
Yeah, I can't tell you how often. I can tell you they are brought down both ways, that they are invited to land by the psionics team. Other times they are invited in by the psionics team, but then HPMs, which are high-powered microwave weapons, are deployed, and they have an effect where they can disrupt the flight pattern of the object. And when it is an object, sometimes it's not, and it can result in that aircraft being forcibly brought down.
When they did the attraction of the objects, was it purely psychic, or was there machinery that was used as well?
So there's 5 components to our operation, which might answer a lot of your questions. So the first component is a calling phase. Calling is either through man or machine-based summoning systems. We have man-based systems, which are our psionic assets, which make a connection through intuition or consciousness with the object and can invite it in. The other is a machine-based calling system, which uses many systems, which I'm not going to go into detail about. You could refer to them as a dog whistle or a lure. And UAP, certain types seem to be specifically attracted or responsive to our machine-based calling systems. And then from there, once they're brought in, we communicate with them. Now, the psionics can have a dual role, because in this communication phase, we do a lot of data collection. So it's verifying that what we are seeing is something tangible, also that it is responding to our efforts. So we might invite it to move left or right, or to position our particular machine-based systems in a particular direction, and then measure the response.
The implication of what you're saying is that this intelligence that's behind these objects, whatever it is, seems willing to share.
Yeah, yeah, I think it ultimately is working for us. And it is commonly talked about that what we are getting, even when we weaponize it, is a donation, a gift. And even when we deploy equipment, when there's a combined operation with a psionics team and a machine-based team, all the equipment kind of has to be blessed and brought in when it's a psionically led operation for summoning.
A lot of people watching this, Jake, are going, I'm sure, this is crazy. This guy's making this up. This can't possibly be true. Yeah. Alien vehicles, psychic techniques to engage with technology. This is disinformation, fabrication.
Yeah. Well, we intend to prove that's not the case, which has a lot to do with the timing as to why I'm coming out now. We plan to produce that evidence in our new venture with our teams that we've used for years. In the legacy program, we've now gotten out and we've pooled our resources, and we're backed by venture capital. We're also working in coordination with the most forefront government agencies that you would want involved with us on this subject matter. And we're going to start producing evidence on all of this, and we're going to share it with.
But crucially, you know it works because you've seen it done.
Yes. Yep.
And so have your colleagues.
That's correct.
What would you say to people who might say, there's no way a secret like this could have been kept for so long? I mean, you're describing an operation that, in your experience, has been going for at least 10, 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know how long the program's been doing, the psionics?
I would say, I'm sorry, get over it. I don't know what else to tell you.
So it can be kept. A secret can be kept.
Oh, yeah. Secrets, there are lots of secrets. Some kept for good reasons.
So let me briefly summarize the implications of what you're saying. Aliens are real.
So I would like to know, unfortunately, we got to get really specific with the semantics, okay? So what do you mean by alien?
Something non-human and intelligent built craft that you have been involved in recovering.
Yes, something that is inconsistent with our idea of what a human is involved with these craft.
Are these intelligences, whatever they are they extraterrestrial? Are they from somewhere else, or could they possibly be living on this planet?
I got to remind you, I'm a security and transportation guy that has been involved in this program really within the purview of those two categories. So you're going to have to ask someone else.
I presume you got a chance to talk to the psionics.
Yeah.
When they mentally, telepathically engaged with whatever this intelligence was, what did they tell you about it?
Well, that they refer to it as a they in a very spiritual nature, something like angels, angels and demons. Let's say there's certainly good energies and bad energies, but it's talked of in a very nebulous way like this, because no one really knows what it is. No one, especially on the psionic side, we're still trying to figure that out. We're still trying to figure out exactly what it is. And there's probably a number of things going on. There might be biological entities, and we use the word biological for a very specific reason. Biological, we don't need, we limit it to that because we aren't here to imply that it is sentient or has a consciousness. We really don't know that. There is some evidence that shows it might be the case that these are something like soft tissue drones or lab meat that was programmed in order to operate craft.
Meat robots.
Meat robots, yeah.
Okay.
So it really begs the question, but ironically, while some of the biological cargo that comes with these craft is not conscious, consciousness itself is how you interact and pilot the craft, which is ironic because for the first time ever, the biological creatures inside are not conscious, but the craft is.
The other implication too, from what your experience shows, is that whatever and wherever the intelligence is that's behind those craft, it seems friendly, benevolent.
Benevolent, yeah.
In fact, loving?
Loving. It's, if you want to connect with it, if you want to have a relationship, and if you want to see stuff flying in the sky, you need to be channeling a loving energy. That's
I find
just
that
the way it
quite
works.
beautiful.
Yeah, it is. In fact, there can be individuals in the group that throw off that vibe, that can mess up the vibration of the psionics work and their communication with the beings, and then you aren't as successful.
Have you, in any of the work that you've done, and I know you're being very limited in what incidents you're prepared to talk about, have you ever come across malevolent intelligence that's non-human?
I have not. I personally have not.
Have any of your colleagues?
You'll have to ask them.
Okay. The implications, though, of what you're telling us are incredible. We are not alone.
We are not alone.
There is a non-human intelligence that has been engaging with this planet.
Yes.
To your knowledge, is it just the United States that is having these encounters?
No. No, I can tell you for a fact that my team has been sought after for our unique service that we provide by organizations outside the United States.
But let's to be clear, I don't want to put you in the position of imputing that you might have been helping unfriendly countries. Neither of the countries or none of the countries that you worked with are foreign adversaries.
No, not. And when I say that, I use the word organizations instead of governments because there are many other folks that may be operating in a private capacity that. So let me say this. This situation is not unique to the U.S.
To your knowledge, are Russia and China doing retrievals of non-human craft?
I have no idea. I imagine they are.
Why would you say that?
Well, because this particular activity is not unique to the United States. I know for a fact that members of my team have been asked to provide our expertise and service for organizations outside the U.S., not China and Russia, but the U.S. government does not have a monopoly on the UAP subject matter. I mean, the skies are not classified. Your conscious can't be redacted. So the NHI can connect with whoever the hell they want, and whoever the hell they are can connect with NHI. And this lends itself to a particular situation, a formula that you can imagine exists, which is if you have a belief that this is a worthwhile venture, which ironically, the government has made extremely clear. Like there are many people, myself and our new organization included, that is not waiting on the government to say this is something you should invest time and energy on. And that's become abundantly clear in the last 2 years. But prior to that, anyone that had the will to believe that and the money to invest and the tools and techniques and talent in order to do it could set up their own communication, crash recovery, and reverse engineering program anywhere in the world. The NHI does not hold itself out exclusively for the United States.
Why has this been kept secret from all of us?
Oh God, I don't know. I really don't know. I imagine, I have to trust that, be careful what you wish for. There might be very good reasons. I imagine that some of what we see, I know that some of what we see is our own advanced tech. And it's absolutely imperative that we keep a competitive advantage over our adversaries. As a patriot, that's paramount. We need to be able to defend ourselves. And unfortunately, you can't tell the public things without telling your adversaries. So therefore, the public, for their own good, is going to be kept, they're going to be kept out of the know on certain subjects. And so there's this difference between secrecy and privacy. And I'll lay this out because we need to be able to flip back and forth between the two. Privacy is something that protects responsibilities and the dignity of whoever needs that privacy. Secrecy is something that typically hides vices, amoral intentions, and crimes, let's say. I know for the most part that what we're dealing with when it comes to our government, the subject matter, is a matter of privacy, not secrecy, if you want to look at it that way.
So, Jake, hearing your story about a psionic program inside the legacy UAP retrieval program makes me think back to cases like the 1980 Bentwaters incident,
case.
Where at an RAF base, a Royal Air Force base in the United Kingdom, Christmas 1980, a craft allegedly landed in an adjacent forest, the Rendlesham Forest.
Yeah.
What do you think happened there?
Man, that's one of my favorite cases. Once I began looking into the history of this thing, that's one of the ones that stood out to me, especially when you think about where we are now. I'll tell you this, if Bentwaters happened tomorrow, like, this thing would be over with. And
because they couldn't conceal it.
No, well, you couldn't conceal it, but it's just everything we're looking for has already happened. Like your book, for example, In Plain Sight. If you just look, it's so obvious. But that one case has everything we need. And I don't know how anyone can say there's no evidence of extraterrestrial. And maybe they're hanging their hat on that's why we have non-human intelligence. Maybe they're trying to hang their hat on this one little narrow place they can slip through, which is things are not from outside the planet. I don't know how they're doing that. But whatever the case, what went on at Bentwaters has everything we need. It has firsthand experiencers, people that have made physical contact with the craft, the most reputable people in the Air Force at that time, working on a nuclear facility. OSI shows up immediately.
The Office of Special Investigations.
The Office of Special Investigation.
And that's a US Air Force office.
Yes, people are sworn to secrecy. It happened on multiple occasions. There's multiple sensor data that goes with the first-hand witness testimony.
What do you speculate brought that craft down?
Well, I'm certainly speculating, but after my experience, I think what may have happened in that case is it may have been a craft that was attracted to a psionic asset or was being operated by a psion. If that craft was ours and it was being operated psionically, there's this thing called link loss. Link loss is it's a common phrase used with drone operation. Drones are, or UAVs as we call them, unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAS, they're also called that, unmanned aerial systems, are operated remotely. In the off chance that there's a disconnect between the operating system or the transmitting side and the receiving side within these craft, it's called a link loss. And when that happens, our man-made systems are designed to RTB, or return to base, or they can go to designated landing sites in a link loss. So that same system would be deployed, because commonly what happens with a psionic asset who is using a form of intuition and consciousness to connect with the craft, there's a disconnect, we call it, which is like link loss. I can tell you, when we run exercises using the psionic assets in an intentional environment to get samples to the ground, we intentionally disconnect the psionic asset so that the HPM systems can be energized, because there are some potential issues that can happen if the psionic asset is still connected to the craft when it's hit with an EMP or other HPM.
I'm told part of their consciousness can stay in the craft.
Yeah, it seems to be the case that the human being can suffer some form of cognitive injury by still being connected to that craft when that craft is de-energized.
In the course of your high-value target investigation, you met Dr. Stephen Greer.
Yeah, I did.
What was the purpose of meeting Dr. Stephen Greer?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that, you can say what you want about Dr. Greer, but the guy's been 30 years ahead of everyone else on a lot of the details of this subject.
So a lot of what he says is correct.
To me, he's like the Bentwaters. Like, we had everything we needed in 1980, and now we're fishing around for morsels of that. This guy, he's been ahead of everyone. And what I find quite funny is the one thing he gets the most shit for is the one thing he's probably most right about, and that is his CE5 protocol.
So CE5 is when he uses meditation and he claims it engages telepathically with the phenomenon.
Yeah, that's his term for it. Like, we don't use CE5. We don't use Dr. Greer's protocol. No to other people in the program or subsequent programs.
So CE5 is real.
Yeah, if we're going to use his term, I'll tell you what is real is the ability to go into something like a meditative state and summon UAP and pilot UAP. That is real. That's 100% real.
Wow. I have to process that for a moment because that is just the most extraordinary claim.
Yeah.